standardizing than it is today, because I wanted to add information about adding sources. One caveat to that is on Sunday I was sitting in my class and I opened up and started to add some sources and the screen looked completely different. And I went, oh, why do they always do this right before I have to teach a class? But as I went back to go over my slides yesterday, everything has gone back to normal, but I know that it is now coming. It will be changing, and significantly so. Just keep that in mind. They are trying to make everything a little bit easier to do, the things that I'm talking about today, but I'm going to take you through some case studies, basically, and just show you how I work and use the material. So with that being said, okay, so as I said, we're going to be talking about standardizing. Let me make sure that this is working. So what we're talking about is standardizing dates and places, and actually names. And this helps you to clarify the information that you enter into Family Search so that it can do a better job of looking for records and duplicates. And I'm taking it a little step further than what most people I have witnessed do, and I hope that you'll learn from it and be able to apply some of these things. We're also talking about adding sources, and this helps you to see the evidence for the dates or other information that exists there. Sources come in a lot of various formats. They come in records, they come in personal histories, they come on pieces of paper up in my library that are just handwritten and scrawled. You know, we have so many sources that it really helps if you actually put into the record for each individual why you came to that conclusion or what the information holds and why you thought that that was correct, so that other people coming behind you can understand how you came to that decision. And I decided today, oh, and then also because it'll generate new sources and research, but I decided today to show you some of the weird cases, because hopefully you'll never come across as many of the weird cases as I do, but you'll learn from them a lot in how to handle things that are a little bit more unique and not expected. So with that being said, I am going to give the nod to the FH guide. There are several classes being taught here and also recorded, so I'm not going to go into that in depth, but just know that when you go to the FH guide, your options are at the top, and if you click on Family Search and Family Tree, it'll take you to this page with the project and goals, and you would just click on maybe, change information and adding sources. Those are the two topics that we're covering today. Again, I'm going to be covering more of on a, I don't even know how to describe it, but we're more like case study, because you know, I used to homeschool my kids for a couple of years, and I just learned it was much easier to teach them math by teaching them how to do something else that involved math. And I think this is kind of the same way, that if you learn how to attach the sources and add information and standardize kind of all at the same sense, it makes a little bit more sense. At least it does to me, and I hope it will for you. So we're talking about standardizing, and standardizing is putting things into a format that the computer understands and that is searchable and can be matched up in the system. And I go into a lot more detail about that in my last presentation. This doesn't like when I get too far out of the realm. Let's see. Maybe. Bob, did you put any batteries in this one? Okay. Can you get me a new battery for this, Bob? Apparently not all the batteries got changed. Okay, so we're talking about vital information. Vital information consists of your name, birth, christening, death, and burial. And those are the fields that seem to make the most amount of difference when they are put in the proper format of having names spelled out, having dates spelled out properly and put in the right format. And you'll see that as we go along. And then also, there's something called additional facts, which are alternate names, residence, occupation. There's a long list of them. You can even make up some of your own. And those additional facts are what tell the story of the lives of the people that you're working with and the information. And generally, when you attach a source, either the information will go into that first column, or it will add information to that second column of additional facts. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how to edit those as well to make them make a little bit more sense and to help your research. Thank you. So when I look at my records, I always think of it in terms of this is, whoops, go back. you start with records, and it leads you to vital and other information, which then leads you to more records, which then leads you to more vital and other information, and it kind of goes on a cycle. And that's how I use it. The more information I add, the more the records that will pop up for me, and the more information I'll get, which then will give me more information. I'll show you a great example that just happened to me as I was actually preparing this today. This is a slide from the last presentation about names, because names are so critical in finding people. And yet, at the very same time, I always tell people spelling is the least important part of genealogy. If you get hung up on the spelling, you're going to be really frustrated, because by not worrying so much about how a name is spelled, now making sure that they're in the right field, even if they're spelled incorrectly, is important, but making the fact that they're spelled incorrectly is not as important as getting all those other things standardized. So let's talk about this. So when you add a person and it comes up in that field, it always has a place for title, first name, last name, and suffix. This is because they have to create all these fields for every name. But on that first top section of your page, you don't want, most people are not born with a title, and they often, well, they may have suffixes as a junior, but they're not usually a senior when they're born. And so
in title, like doctor and earned titles, or
we're going to talk about that.
Titles?
We're going to talk about that. So, let me see, just come apart here. So, when you look at names, the first names are going to be in the first section here, which we call a field, and then last names go in that last name field. Anything before the last name goes in the first name field. Now, I actually don't do a lot of Swedish genealogy, but just recently I've been helping some people do Swedish genealogy, and all of a sudden I'm like, what's the standard for that? Because I have like these farmlands and last names, and I'm like, I don't know what the correct way to do that is. And so what I do is I ask somebody who knows more than I do, and I text somebody in my ward who's just a genius at Swedish genealogy. I say, okay, help me understand this, because it's going to affect the way that it does searches if I don't do that correctly. It's not that you can't do it, that things won't pop up randomly or occasionally because you put it in there wrong. But if you put it in there correctly, you're going to get way more bang for your buck. So I always want to do that. So, so going to the next slide, we're going to talk about additional rules for names. So you always want to use the birth name or the earliest known name that you can find for a person to go into that top section. Don't use later names in life if you can help it. There are some exceptions. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Women, it should always be their maiden name. If you don't know their maiden name, don't put their married name in that field. They weren't born with they were not born married, right? So putting in their married name makes it hard for the system, because the system thinks that's a maiden name, so it's going to look for somebody. If it's looking for their married name, it's not going to find the results as easily. Don't type in all capital letters. In the past, they used to use capital letters to help offset, so you would know that and recognize that that was a surname. Now that we have the use of fields that say this is the last name, we don't need to do that, and so don't do that. Don't use quotation marks, parentheses, underscores, slashes, or other characters. That actually kind of confuses the system, because they have to program everything. So when you add in extra characters, that goes into the searching. And it actually frustrates that purpose as well. And I found that out because you'll find from, just as an example, they used to put carets in for things when they meant to say about, they would put a caret before and after date. And I noticed that my searches for records, it wouldn't show anything. As soon as I took those carets out, all of a sudden records showed up. And I realized that it was interfering with the searches. And so try not to put those in there. Occasionally you can't help it, but I really try to avoid it. Don't use or between names. Sometimes you say, well, they went by this or that. I'm going to show you how to handle alternate names. I'd like to introduce you to my husband's grandparents. They were clearly one of the best set of genealogists I've ever not known in my life. No, I actually did meet her, but I'd never met him. And we inherited about 200 years of records as a direct result of the work that they've done. And she was an impeccable genealogist. My daughter, once, it was like 2 Christmases ago, I asked her to come home. She's a librarian by study. She's getting her doctorate right now. And I said, will you help me to catalog some of the information that we have here? And she walked away that Christmas saying, wow, I had no idea my grandmother was such a great genealogist and how detailed and impeccable she was. And so that was kind of a neat thing to draw them together. But who I'm really actually going to talk about today is this Leola Nicholson Patterson Dickey. What a name. If I could make money on the names in my husband's family, I would, because they're amazingly crazy. But that was his long name. And if you look at his family tree or fam chart, you can see his name in there is Leola Nicholson Patterson Dickey. And Patterson Dickey is what's in his last name field, and I'll explain why. Because if you look up here, he was born a Patterson. And I'm going to go through his life story a little bit. Here he is shown as Leola in his first marriage, and then here in the second, under her second marriage. And I always document things like that, and this is a good case of why. Because his mother, Margaret Virginia Clements, married William Alexander Patterson in 1898. And they had Leola, and then they divorced shortly after. So she, a few years later, when Leola was about 5 years old, she married a Parker Mudgett Dickey. How do you come up with a name like that? Well, actually, they have the same name carrying on tradition as my husband's family, because Mudgett came from his mother's maiden name, or back in her family line. And my husband ended up getting the Dickey as the middle name, which he's never loved, right? So anyway, when they married, if you'll notice below here, Albert was Parker's son from a previous marriage, and they had the same birth year. They were the exact same age. They actually grew up almost like twins. They were dressed alike. And Parker did not want those two boys going to school with different names and everything, so he changed and had Leola go by Dickey. Well, Leola was never legally adopted. There are no legal records changing his name, except for the fact that he entered school, he wrote down the name, this is his name, and that's what it became. Forevermore, that was his name. Well, that'd be okay, except the family knew that his name was Patterson, not Dickey. So do you put the Patterson in that last name field or Dickey? Well, here's the dilemma. If you look at these records and you click on sources, because it's now up there, so I want you to know where to find it. The only records that list Patterson are family records, his obituary, the family documented it, and on his headstone. Every other record in his life, he was listed as Dickey. And so to avoid any confusion with his name, both names are put in his last name field. They're both searchable, but I don't want somebody thinking they're two different people, and I don't want there to be confusion. And so this is one of those rare instances, probably the only time I've really put two people's last names, or a person's last name, both last names in a field. But sometimes you have to make your records fit. Now, there would be another way. I could just make one an alternate name, but it just, in this case, it felt better to do it this way. Now, I told you our family didn't really like the Dickey name much, but I just have to draw attention to it. Parker had a younger sister named Clara Blanchard Dickey, and she had kind of a similar issue. Her name, is anybody familiar with that name, Clara Blanchard Dickey? Nobody is, until I show you this next slide. Anybody familiar with that? Oh my God. She is Auntie Anne. Okay? Really cool. And this is, I scanned this from our records, and at the bottom of the page it said Parker Mudgett Dickey's sister. Okay? Written by somebody in the family. So kind of a cool thing, but her name was listed as Clara Blandick, right? Well, how is that? How could she be Clara Blanchard Dickey and Clara Blandick? Well, Clara Blanchard Dickey was born that, and she was actually delivered by a ship's captain. Her dad was a captain as well in a neighboring ship in Hong Kong. The captain came over with his wife, and they helped to deliver Clara. So that's how she got the middle name of Blanchard, was from Captain Blanchard. So when she took a stage name, she just blended those two, the middle name and the last name, to create the name Blandick. So that creates an interesting thing, just like the other, because she was born as Clara Blanchard Dickey. So that is what we have in there as Clara Blanchard Dickey in the vital information at the top of the screen. Under other information, we have also known as Clara Blandick. And then you can see that her occupation is listed as an American stage and screen actress. So that clearly reflects her life and her name changes in a way that people can understand and see how that works. And again, you're saying, well, I don't know if I have that many people in my family to change their names, but it actually does happen more than you think, and at least they, well, maybe I work with crazy people. But I do want to show you here, under alternate names, Clara Blanchard, you could delete that because that is a duplicate. Anything that's found up in vital information, if it's identical in alternate names, you can delete the alternate name. They don't need both of those in there, and it helps clean up the records. So I haven't taken that out yet, but I wanted to show you how that's done. So I'm going to go back to Margaret. So Margaret, remember I told you she married a man named William Alexander Patterson, and she had, and here's the marriage record for that. And in there it lists her father as T.E. Clement. And just so you know, I always go and review every attachment. When I'm working on a line, as much as possible, I want to look at the attachments side by side with what information was from the record that got indexed and what actually got put into the person ID record for that person. And so I went and I looked at it and I can see, yep, there it is. Great, T.E. Clement, Thomas Edmondson Clement, there's Margaret Clement. Everything's very consistent. The marriage date is the same. Perfect. So let me make sure I'm doing this right because I did. Okay. But then I wanted to go look at the actual record. So I went to the film number and I looked at the record and I can see, yep, there's William Alexander Patterson. He has the residence age. The name of the bride is Margaret Clement, and the residents are all living there in Monroe, Georgia. It's not like when I do this. Okay, and actually it's in Macon, Georgia, I'm sorry. And so if you look at here, it continues on. It says her age was 19 and that her father was T.E. Clement. And then they crossed out maiden name as widow and put birthplace, and it said Monroe, Georgia. And so I was interested in that because I wanted to go back and check. Does that list it as her birthplace? Actually, I made the mistake of thinking it was his birthplace because it came right after his name, which happens sometimes, but it was my luck because I did a search, and I noticed there is no Monroe listed anywhere on any of the residences. There's no Monroe anywhere. So then I went ahead and I did a search here, and I just put in T.E. Clement and Monroe, Georgia, with nothing else in there, but I put it in the birthplace. Normally I would have put it in any place or residence, but any place would have been better. And what happened was it brought up this marriage record. If you'll notice, there's nothing showing that that record has ever been attached to those two people. And I went, wow, but the marriage date is the same. So I think it's them, except I wonder if that Fanny Ellis is a nickname of some sort. Is that possible that she actually went by Fanny and nobody knew that? So then the next thing I did was to go look at the actual record. And I see, yep, there's T.E. Clement and his wife, Fanny Ellis. Only if I looked a little bit closer, I could see it really was Francis. That was an indexing error, not necessarily that I would fault them, because I think it does look like a little bit like Fanny. And they didn't have the family records to put it into context. But this is an important lesson that you want to go look at the records. Be sure to look at the records because you'll find information that you maybe weren't aware of. And somehow this wouldn't have come up in the search for Francis. It came up for Fanny. But by just doing a simple search on one or the other and looking in the right place for the record, I was able to find this record that nobody else had attached. And there have been a lot of records attached, but not that one. So then, so here's an important clue. What's indexed in the record is what helps you find the record. Okay? It's not everything that's in the record itself. So you want to look at that and then take things that you find in that record and add them back into your people, your person ID, whatever. So I always struggle with that. And then just know that you'll miss important details if you don't study the actual record. So here I go ahead and I'm going to attach it. I already went ahead and attached the first record, but I'm going to show you how to attach this record, how I do it. I want to make sure I do this right because...
Is that two separate records?
Okay, so when it attaches a record, it lists the people in the sources, and there were 2 copies of that record.
Oh, 2 copies of one record. Okay.
Right, so one was an index and one was the actual image itself. But keep in mind, if you're born even today, you might have a hospital record, a county record, a state record. So there become multiple records representing certain different facts. And this is the best thing I can tell you, is to attach every record. Some people go, oh, it's just duplicated. No, attach every record. You don't want loose records floating out there for people to think they belong to somebody else. I want every record that there is. And some marriage records will have just the bride and groom. Other records will have the parents and the children, or I mean, both sets of parents. And so I'll make a notation of that generally if they have that as well. So when I go and attach the record, let's see if this will work. You can see I click and I compare, and I go up there. I don't like typing, so I usually cut and paste. I copy that, and then I make a sentence out of it, and I'll say T.E. Clement, it's a marriage, so it's marriage 2. And in this case, I'm going to put Francis Ellis because I know that's what the record actually says after looking at it. But I'm going to make a notation that it was indexed as Sandy Ellis. So if somebody comes behind me isn't going to think, oh, hey, you missed a name or you did something wrong. And then I copy the exact date. So it shows up in the history. So I don't have to open the record to see what it is. Just looking down the history, I can see what's in that record. And notice here, I can see that the dates are the same. I'm not going to move over the second marriage because there's already a marriage for that date in that place. And so I don't want to have duplicate marriage records or events in there. And in this case, I decided to add it to my source box because it was kind of a fun find. And that's how I generally attach sources. It's going to change dramatically based on what I changed on Sunday. So good luck on that one. But so I think there's another class coming. Okay, so now once I've added this, I can see that the marriage is now correct, 14th of November, 1878 in Monroe, Georgia. Now, something I've noticed after doing this for a long time is that they put the standardized dates and places at the bottom of the list, and they let the ones that are non-standard float to the top. So if you look at this marriage section right here, and it's not standardized, it doesn't mean that there's not a standardized version in there. It just means that that there's non-standard ones above that. I go in and remove anything that's a duplicate that's non-standard and make sure, and I want to have one good standardized version of it. The only exception is sometimes you have a marriage ban and a marriage, actual marriage date, and I'll have 2 marriage records for that. So does anybody have any questions about that? Yes.
When you're standardizing in the new thing, I noticed it comes up with information with the, you call it the narrative.
Yeah.
So when I'm choosing the standardized state, do I choose the one with the...
It has a little calendar on it right next to it. Yeah, choose the one with the calendar. Whatever is in gray, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that. Whatever is in gray is what you've got in there, and then what is below that with the little calendar icon next to it, that's the standard. That's what the system considers a standard, and you want to choose that. Okay, so then T.E. Clements, his father was Wesley P. Clements, and I happened to notice this as I was looking at it, and I said, Dr. Wesley P. Clements, M.D., that's a little redundant, isn't it? Yeah. By anybody's standards? And he wasn't born as a doctor. I'm pretty sure I've never met anybody who was just born a doctor, right? He had to work towards it. So I went and I looked at this. Actually, there's this. So I looked at it and I see who made changes, and it was this KR75, and they said added doctor. So clearly they didn't understand that that was redundant. Okay, fine, that's fine. But I noticed that there are 5 people who have contributed to this record and are watching this record, so I want to be cautious. But one of the things I find is people are afraid to change things because other people are looking, or they don't feel like they have a right to do that. You do have a right to do it, but do it responsibly and make sure that you're using best practices. So in this case, I know I'm using best practices. So what I did is I said, oh, there's her thing there. So what I did is I went back, and before this said other, I changed it to English because there was no other language. I just changed it so it's in English. I took out the title and the suffix, and then I put this. And this is kind of a teaching moment. I said removing titles and credentials from first name field. Now, most people don't think of that first field as their birth name field, but I want people to think of it as that way. So I label it that way because then when they come behind, they go, oh, I didn't realize that was for birth names. Or at least that's my hope. And then I make a note that I'll put the title, name, and other information as alternate name. So now I not only told them I'm changing it, but and where I'm going to put it, so I'm not just dismissing it. So I come up here and I click on Add Other Information. Have any of you added alternate names before or alternate information? Some of you, okay.
Well, I don't know if I did it right, but I just saw a guy a few minutes ago that had, his name is Levin C, and they put Lloyd in quotation marks, which I've got to get rid of. And they spell Lloyd with 2 L's, but it would appear from most things he only spelled it with 1.
Okay, so how would you handle it?
Well, I put the single Lloyd as an alternative name. Is that right?
Yep. And then under your explanation, you could put all documentation shows only 1 L. And then if you come across a document, now this thing said, I learned from Krista Cowan from Ancestor one time, she said, you could have 5 records that are completely wrong and only 1 that's right. We often assume that the more records there are that are one way, that's the right way, but it's not. And that's why we try to go back to the original, like a birth record. I generally hope that the parents will put the correct spelling on the birth record. I don't expect that a census worker would put the correct spelling. So, yes.
Can we assume that too on headstones? I have one who was Rosalie, but her husband survived her. So I assumed her husband knew that her name was not Rosalie or Rosa, but Rosalia or Rosalia. So I assumed the survivor knows the correct name.
I covered that in the previous one that was recorded because we have that same situation where you have birth records and then you have headstone records, and how do you determine what is the correct record? And you have to look at all of the evidence combined and say, maybe she went by a different name later on and that's why he put that. So I go back to the original birth record if possible. If you can't, then you might say, well, I'm going to say the husband trumps the other record. Then you might go to a marriage record, and if the marriage record, you have water, I have a fresh bottle. I just barely popped it in. What's that? So you have to, that's why Family Search doesn't allow you to just change things at will as you're attaching the source. They want you to compare all the pieces of information. And multiple things could be right. That's the hard part about it. Sometimes I go, I'm not sure. But if you handle it with putting whatever you do and then put in the alternate names, I don't put things that are, sometimes there's just a one-off spelling on a census record. To me, that's not an alternate name. The computer actually can figure that out. The computer removes all the vowels when it does searches. So, but if it was a true variation of a name, then I will put that in as an other name. So you just have to use your best judgment on that, and sometimes family will prevail. Recently, my daughter, who after she became converted to genealogy through her grandmother by going through all of our records, she went back to Indiana, became the family history leader in her ward, or her branch actually. And she sent me a picture the other day where somebody had gone in and they put numbers, like the pound sign plus a number after every one of the children and people in the family. And she was like, what? And he's basically treating the tree like his own tree. That would be fine in his own tree. It's not standard in Family Search, and it shouldn't be in there. Now, how you handle that needs to be with care, I believe. And I haven't had a chance to go look at it in person, but I would probably be willing to have a conversation with him about why that actually will make things worse by keeping it in Family Search. So anyway, it's an interesting dilemma. So that's interesting. I don't know why that did that. Okay. Well, we'll go on. Okay, so anyway, so that's fine. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I'm going backwards. I should have been backwards. Okay, so here's where I did go down and I added also known as Dr. Wesley P. Clements. Now, I could have put Wesley P. Clements, MD, but since somebody already made the mistake of not understanding that MD meant doctor, I just kept it as doctor. And I really don't know what his medical degree was, so I just put that I do know he was a medical doctor. And then here, also known as, there you go. Okay, so, after you miss.
We have the people that are like not only doctors, but they're actually PhDs.
Exactly, yeah. So the correct one would be MD at the end, not doctor, because I have doctors in my family who are PhD medical doctors, but not, and then I have other ones who have their PhD and have a doctorate, but that are not medical doctors. So that was when I just on the slide put doctor because that other person had made that error, and somebody else may come in and add MD, or you could put both in the other field. I don't really care once it's in the other field, to be honest, but it's kind of interesting. Oh, let's see. Let's go back here. So I wanted to show you. Remember I told you I found that record for that marriage in Monroe County, and I went to his Thomas Edmondson's records. I couldn't find any evidence in his history that he had lived in Monroe. So I decided to go in and add this information, and so let me just click here. So what I did is I went in and added the information based on that being his residence. And then, I don't usually put a description of the residence unless it actually defines something, but I put 1878 because that was the year I think that they were married. And then I start typing in Monroe and then Georgia. And then notice what happens is up below here there are actually two Monroe, Georgias. One is a city and one is a county. Well, I know that those marriages were a county, so I chose the county and that it was a county since 1821 to present. So that's the one that I chose, and when I click on that, it changes, and then I just put in my reasons stating that the birth of the first child was in Monroe, as well as the marriage took place in Monroe. That way, I got two events. Now, it is possible somebody could go to Monroe, get married, leave, come back, have a baby, and leave, and actually live somewhere else. That is possible. So, but by putting in my evidence, I don't think anybody would necessarily argue with the fact that I thought they probably did live in Monroe at that time. And then you can see now that that's changed as their residence. Now, what's interesting, I had forgotten that I put this in here. When I first, back in 1876, I had a note from Frances Virginia Ellis, which I thought was so cute. It says, I met Thomas Edmondson Clements when I was about 21 years of age. That's why I put the 1876 in. He was from Forsyth, Georgia. He was just a country boy. He had dark brown eyes and dark hair, dark brown, and a lot of hair. He wasn't like Papa. He had lots of hair. Hair became a big issue in our family. Half of them went bald. So I just thought that was really cute. And then I put, you'll notice the residence is Forsyth, Georgia. But just from that earlier record, I had now learned that there was a Forsyth, Georgia as a county and a city, which at the time I put it in. I just put Forsyth, Georgia and left it and didn't really think much about it. But now, let me make sure I don't miss something here. I actually want to go in and fix that, because now I understand that there's a difference between that. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you the timeline feature that they have. Have any of you played with the timeline? Timeline is so cool because you can see where people moved around. Well, I see Forsyth, Georgia was all the way up there, and all the other events were down lower. Like, well, why is that? Well, it's because I had chosen the city instead of the county. And so I'm going to come back in here, and now I'm going to update it now that I understand the difference between the two of them. And I'm going to not choose the first one, but the second one that says it was a city in Monroe. And then I can click and save that. And normally I would just say standardize or change. I didn't really. The same reasoning applies. But now it's no longer up there. It's down here, and you can start to see this evolution of progression of their lives as they head down to Florida. So I think that's a really cool thing that we can do, and I think the timeline is going to help people understand how standardizing and putting dates and places in the system really helps to formulate the story and where they went and how they got there, and things will stand out when they're not in the exact right place. They do, you can see that. So the same thing happened for the census. You know, when they did the census, it just said Georgia census. So it said in 1870, it just said they lived in Georgia, which puts them, plunks them down right on the map somewhere. So I went and looked at it, and I see, but it was still Monroe, and it was actually the post office was Forsyth. So they were still in that area in 1870. So I want to go and change that and update it just to make it a little bit more accurate, because when you first attach the source, it's just going to move it over as Georgia. But now that I can make it a kind of a more complete record, I really want to do that. So I did. And I'm showing you how to do this. So I went in again. I looked. There's the date of residence in there. I'm just going to press. I can start typing, and I'm just going to start typing Forsyth. And as I'm typing, I'm looking down below, and I see, oh, there's the one I want, and I click it and change it. Now, somebody else had this explanation there. I decided to leave theirs in there because that was actually really good that they put that in there. But I also put the census listed Forsyth as the county. I'm not a very good typist. You can see that right now. Georgia as the place of residence at that time. So now it's going to line up on the calendar really well too, which I just like that. I think it's a really cool feature. And then I would say that. So then I went back, and I was looking at another record for William Peyton, which is Thomas's brother, and I noticed that in the Georgia death, it shows W.P. Clement, and it shows his death on the left side in the record, but somehow that information from the record never got transferred over to the person. And sometimes I'll just detach and then reattach, but I was going to have to standardize something anyway, the date or whatever, so I didn't want to do that. I just figured either way I have to fix it. But as I was also looking down, I noticed that there's two residences for 1920. One is in Bentonville, I don't know how you say that, and the other one is Silverton, Georgia. I'm pretty sure he wasn't in both censuses in 1920, although that being said, I have seen people in two censuses in two different places when people claim them twice. So I would have to do a little research to find out. But if I go in and I remove this residence, if I detach that source, I also want to go in and delete that event so that it doesn't show up in its history, because that probably belongs to somebody else, another W.P. Clement. Does that make sense to anybody? Everybody? Okay. So, let's see what comes here.
How did you put the place of death? How did you attach that?
So the record is already attached, so all I'm going to do is go into the death, and I'm going to edit it.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to show you how I did that. Oh, I am. See, I thought, I'm just going to give you an example. So I went into the death, I click edit. That's already standardized, that's already proper. So I just type in that Bentonville, whatever it is, I can say, and it pops up. So I'm going to choose the one that has the little marker, map marker, because I know that that's the correct place. And then whoever attached it before put death census on record here, but I'm going to change it and say that this was part of Georgia deaths, and that's, and it listed his death as in that town or county. Now it was a town. Okay, so now when I go back, this is what it looks like before, and you can see that the death just had the death but not the place. So I'm always looking, whenever I come across people, I'm like, if they lived in if they died in 1900, surely we have a place for that, correct? I'm going to go see if I can find that, because I want really complete records. And now you can see here's where it's changed and correct after I've edited it. Actually, a tongue twister, okay? So just in review, we want to standardize names, dates, places, everything that we can put in that standardized format with the names in the correct field. Again, spelling can be kind of a little fishy, but that's okay. But we want their records to actually reflect their lives, but then we also want the records to support that as well. So be sure to compare the attached sources and update standardized information. When people have problems in their tree, the first thing I do is go and compare all the records that have already been attached to see where the discrepancies are. Where was the mistake made or was something left out? Middle initials are often left out. They'll attach a record but not update the middle name or middle initial or update the actual day of something. And it's so much easier if you go, it takes a little bit of time to go edit those, but it sure pays off in the long run. And then you want to attach and add sources and add and update and standardize those information. So once you attach the source, often, I kind of wish that they would standardize the index information before you attach it so that it would make it less work. They don't. Okay, so they don't. So if I attach a source, I do try to go in and then correct and standardize it. Now, I don't have time to standardize every piece of other information. So my highest priority is that first box, the vital information, name, date, place, christening, anything that's in that main field, I want to be standardized. Everything below that is optional, but it sure makes it nice if you take the time to do that. And then look for and attach every record a person should be found in. And some of those records I found that they were still living, but nobody had attached or we hadn't found where they were, say, in the 1910 census. They didn't die until 1924, so they should have been in the 1920 census, they should have been in the 1910. And hopefully some of the new pieces of information I now have will help me to know where to look for them specifically. And sometimes, as you know, you can hop over into Ancestry and somehow the way their searches are done or the way that they index it might pop up over there. But then I want to come back into Family Search and I want to find that index record in Family Search and attach it the way it should be. And then make note, why can I find them? So the goal is really to have a complete, accurate, standardized, and source record for every person in your tree. Okay, I know that's kind of sad because you have like thousands and thousands, but for every place that you're working or you have an interest in, I really believe that you're drawn to certain places. Sometimes I will get drawn into something and I'll be able to make really big changes and help push things along and clean up things because I feel like I'm really good at standardizing and adding sources. And then I leave it for other people to continue on their work. And then I go back to, they're all branches of my tree, but I can't focus on all of them. But what I'm focusing on, I do all of these things for. And then the real goal at the end of all this is to have completed ordinances for every person in your tree. And I guarantee you that you'll get the most complete and accurate record by doing the things we're talking about. And then those ordinances won't be duplicated because it will bring up the duplicates in the system, which are really actually getting cleaned up pretty quickly now. And so anyway, I left a few minutes at the end because I wanted you guys to have some time to practice and have a chance to edit. And maybe just pick one of your grandparents and to go and look and see, is their name in there correctly? Is it standardized? Are they in every source that they should be in for the time that they're living? Which means, can you find a birth record, a death record? Are they in all the censuses? What about marriage records? Are the names complete in those records that you find? That would be my hope, that if you'd have a few minutes today and could do that. That being said, do any of you have any questions? Great. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they're born in another country.
Yes.
And they still need to come in and you
So so that is a good question because they actually have, if for certain languages, you can add multiple lines for their spelling.
Really?
Not every language because I'm working on Greek and I can't do that one. I have one that I'm a family member in Persian and they don't have that one. But they do have like Chinese and Japanese and Italian and Spanish. They have a list. Remember when I said I changed the language to English? Mm-hmm. If you change it to the other language, it allows you to put those characters in and it recognizes that it's searching in a different language. So it's very helpful to put in those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I do have a question for you because this was a kind of more of a case study thing. Do you feel like that's a good way to learn that way, or would you prefer just to learn how to attach sources or learn how to standardize and just stay on one thing? Because I know the ADD, so I go all the way. So anybody have an opinion on that before?
I think it's both.
Okay. Your question? Yeah?
Well, I like the way you do it, but then, I have a little practice.
So you have,
someone who has never standardized it, they can figure it out.
Yeah, and that's again why, if they hadn't recorded the other presentation, I probably would have spent more time on standardizing, but I didn't want to duplicate it so much, and so I didn't do that all over again. But yeah, I love standardizing, and I really could spend the whole time doing that. When I saw that the description was for also adding sources, then that totally changed how I did the class. So I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. You had some questions. Does anybody else have questions you need help? Yeah.
Probably after.
Okay. I'll hold you. You got one that's a little bit long too? Okay, I'll help you. Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming today. I appreciate that.
Well, no.